Hello, this is C.H.E.K, and today I'd like to share a little bit with you about shame and the art of living fully. My inspiration today comes from The Art Spirit by Robert Henri. Excellent book. I referred to it in my two-part series on freedom. And so let's start with a little description of what shame is. Shame, in my opinion, is a deep challenge in any part of the world, particularly where there is Judeo-Christian belief systems, largely due to the mental structure around good, bad, should and shouldn't, sin. So a lot of shame is generated from deviating from what people believe God wants. Well, we can eliminate a lot of shame by just getting one thing clear. Since God is everything, has everything, and is unconditional love, God really doesn't want anything. And since there's only one of you and ever will be one of you, maybe the things that you do that other people shame you for are uniquely, exactly, and perfectly your godly self. And that without a lot of these ideas, we wouldn't have these experiences. So later when we talk about some tips for dealing with shame, hopefully you'll remember that a lot of this is based on stories we believe, but not actual fact or reality. My point is, many people have a lot of pain over shame, over ideas that when looked at openly and honestly turn out to be shamefully wrong. So why invest in a belief if you don't even know for sure if it's worth believing in, just because somebody else is in the habit of maybe getting power by making you feel shameful, which many people often get addicted to. So shame, by definition, a negative emotion that combines feelings of dishonor, unworthiness, and embarrassment. So certainly not something fun to walk around with too much of. A cause of regret or disappointment. My inspiration to talk about this today is something beautifully stated by Robert Henri. He says, shame makes a small man give up a lot of time smearing over and covering up his rough edges. What is he really saying there? He's saying, one, now this, if you read The Art Spirit, you'll see that the grammar is not really good, so it must be translated. But shame, one, makes a small man, man or woman. Because when someone's shameful, they feel as though somehow they're lessened as a human being. My experience is that whenever we make somebody else smaller, we simultaneously make ourselves smaller in the grand scheme of things. So if you're giving constructive feedback to somebody, but you hold esteem for them as a human being, typically there's no need for shameful tactics. If a person is legitimately shameful, they always do a good job of making themselves small without anybody else having to throw gasoline on the fire, so to speak. So we don't want, especially with children, to make people small. Because what if they believe that? What if they actually believe that they're less of a human being, or that they will never be good at this or that? I know this firsthand. It's a very, very painful, dangerous place to put a child or a human being. And it's typically, usually a reflection of the unmet needs of the shamer. Or Marshall Rosenberg says all judgments reflect unmet needs. Or my mother says are desperate expressions of unmet needs in the other person. So we want to be careful not to hurt the rest of ourselves. People that do that haven't really figured out what's going on here yet, but eventually they do, and even they may be shameful when they find out what's going on. So shame makes a small man give up a lot of time smearing over and covering up his rough edges. Well, you know, when you're learning, those rough edges are beautiful. Think of, if you're a parent, think of watching your child learn to play a musical instrument, or learning to draw, or paint, or build, or do crafts. And you get to watch those rough edges transform into something more artistic, more fully expressive. Yet without the rough edges there would be no journey, there would be no life, there would be no story. And sometimes our rough edges turn out to be what makes us beautiful. We like people like Bill Hicks's comedy because it's rough, it's real. We like Eddie Murphy because he wears it on the sleeve. These rough edges turn out to be the facets of diamonds sometimes. So what Robert Henri is saying here is that for an artist to be shameful of their own work results in them spending a lot of time smearing out their own rough edges, which means they're focusing on the negative and not opening their heart to the positive or the potential or maybe even the beauty of those rough edges. Remember, the unique thing about art is that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There is no value on art unless you place it there. And the paradox of it is, if you really get into the issues I talked about in my Freedom series and get dialed into some zero time, you'll find that the whole thing is art. God's an artist. All of this is art. And the one determining the value of it is you and me and whoever. But the truth of it is, this is all art. This is all sandcastles on the beach, baby. So what are some tips for getting over shame? One, focus on what it is that you love bigger than your shamefulness or your problems or your poor me or your fears, right? Focus on what it is that you're willing to become, and that way you know when somebody's opinion is worthy of considering to begin with. In other words, if someone's criticizing your hairdo, but they don't know that you're a dancer and you're on your way to a play or to a show, well, their opinion shouldn't give you any shame at all because they're not in any way understanding of or connected to or aware of your dream and why you're doing what you're doing. So you can get rid of a lot of shame by just knowing that if your actions and your creative self-expression is congruent with your own dream for your own life, then anyone else's opinion is largely just not that important for you to put any weight on unless you're dealing with a legitimate master who's giving you an opinion that you respect and trust. And if you're dealing with a legitimate master, they're probably the last person that's going to make you shameful because they're going to recognize you in themselves because they'll have made that journey. One, use your own conscience. Oftentimes we're being shamed by others, being criticized, being told you're this, you're that, or whatever. But if we're honest with ourselves, our inner voice always tells us. If somebody accuses you of stealing and you know you didn't steal, don't allow them to make you feel shameful. Just be at peace with the fact that you know that you have not done that. We always know, if we're honest with ourselves, what is and isn't true to a large degree. It's very important that you have enough self-integrity to trust your opinion above and beyond anybody else's opinion when you know you're right. And I do mean that. Trust your own opinion until you're absolutely 100% convinced you're wrong if your intention matches your actions and you are moving in the direction of creating something beautiful for yourself and others. So always ask the question, is it true? Oh, you're such a shitty this or such a shitty that. Is it true? Well, even if it is true, if you're just a beginner, it's cool to be shitty at something. That's what a beginner's supposed to be. So don't be afraid to ask the question, is it true? Am I really ugly? Or am I really lousy? Or am I really always such and such? When you can answer that, and if you do answer it and the answer is yes, and it's incongruent with the dream, then go get help from somebody that is a master at that challenge, and you will move forward quickly. But it's still nothing to bleed over inside that just slows your progress down in life. Next, have values, because when you have a dream, a sense of direction, and you have values that support them, criticisms come at all of us no matter what we do, because human beings are radically different. But if you're congruent with your dream, like, some people criticize me because I wear these yoga pants and they want me to wear a business suit. Well, my dream is to be happy, healthy, whole, and comfortable. Not stuffy and fluffy and looking like everybody else and following the robot mind and politics and all that stuff. So this is me. So my point is, if someone criticizes me in that regard, I don't feel shameful at all about the way I dress. I just feel sad that they're not wise enough to at least ask me, what do you do wearing clothes like that? Or something intelligent. So your values is what I'm saying is this fits my values and this fits my dream. So when you have values and you have a clear sense of direction or a dream, then much of what people are criticizing you about, making you feel shameful for, happens to just be outside of the parameter of their own value system. And that's okay. People can drive gas guzzlers, they can drive economy cars, they can eat like gluttons, or they can fast themselves into starvation, all in the name of some agenda. The question is, are you happy, and is that authentically who you are? And if it is, don't worry about other people's opinions of it, because making you feel shameful is going to stop you from effectively doing what you're doing, because you're going to keep trying to cover up everything that you really are. Not a good idea. Process versus outcome. Remember, everything we do is a process. Learning to ride a bike, people fall down. Learning to ride a horse, people fall down. Learning to draw, people start like me. Shitty in the beginning and not too super duper in the long run, but guess what? I dig it. And I just love telling stories on paper with color and expressing myself. And if nobody likes it, that's okay, because I get quite a giggle out of it, and that's all that really matters at this time in my life. Whatever it is, know that to become more beautiful, by your own estimation, is a process that we all have to go through. Most shaming interrupts the process. To shame a child unnecessarily can stunt their growth and development forever. And most people are children in big bodies. Mastery. Whenever you think you're really having any kind of problem, if you legitimately have shame about something, or the way you look, or the way you feel, or the way you act, if it's a blockage to you and it's stopping your creative flow from emerging naturally, find somebody who has mastery in the area where you feel imbalanced and get their help. And finally, remember, masters are inevitably flawed people. Most people think that masters are, some kind of floaty, Dalai Lama, fluffy, whatever they think. But remember, most masters are people that are not only flawed, but have expressed those flaws fully. If they're racing a motorcycle, they go full on, and if they crash big. When Danny Wade jumps on a skateboard, he doesn't jump 2 cars, he jumps the Great Wall of China. But every one of us has many, many interesting flaws that create just a resistance in our relationships that guarantees we're going to grow. No one escapes that. We're all flawed, and that is what is part of our perfection. So remember, when you're going to a master, you're not looking for someone that's perfect. You're looking for someone who perfectly, openly, and honestly expresses themselves and embraces their flaws, and has converted those flaws into something useful and meaningful for them, which is almost always a gift for everyone else, because 98% of the world population is so desperate to look, act, and be accepted by everybody else that they will never be able to live the life of a master, because everyone's opinions are so wildly different. You don't know when you're doing it right and when you're doing it wrong, so you can feel shame on top of shame, on top of fear, on top of guilt, on top of insecurity. Waste of time. Find a master. And as Osho says, if you love a poet, Never go see him in person, because inevitably you're going to find out he has bad breath, tells bad jokes, drinks too much, and farts. Well, remember, masters are human beings, and when you find a real master, you're going to feel very comfortable, because it'll be really obvious quite quickly when they start telling bad jokes, drinking, farting, and their breath doesn't smell so great, and you're wondering, wow, this guy's the best such and such in the world? Yes, he's human, hallelujah! And then you know forever after that even the greatest at anything are flawed, and your path is beautiful, and paddle down the river of the Tao, and I'll see you there. See you next time.